This is Caring for Kids on News Talk 760 WJR, presented by the Children's Hospital of Michigan Foundation. And here's your host, President and CEO of the Children's Hospital of Michigan Foundation, Larry Burns.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caring for Kids May edition. Tonight we have another insightful episode of Caring for Kids featuring three very special guests, all making huge strides in advancing children's health and wellness. Joining us first will be Lyanna Leibert, licensed professional counselor at the Wentworth & Associates. And then Rod Alberts will join us. He's the executive director of the Detroit Auto Dealers Association. And Gary Cates, chief philanthropy officer from ProMedica in Northwest Ohio. It's all coming up next right here on Caring for Kids, here on the great voice of the Great Lakes. News Talk 760 WJR.
It's Caring for Kids with Larry Burns.
And welcome back, everybody. Larry Burns here, Caring for Kids, our May edition. In the studio for our first guest is Lyanna Leibert. She is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan and a nationally certified counselor as well. She is also a level 1 specialist in providing EDMR treatment to children. We'll learn more about that shortly. Lyanna graduated from the University of Florida Counseling Program in 1998 with a master's degree in community counseling and specialist degree in counseling for school settings. Since then, Lyanna has counseled adults, children, adolescents for diverse concerns including anxiety, depression, anger management, and parental conflicts. For over 14 years, Lyanna has enjoyed helping clients find and use the tools they need to cope more effectively with the dips and curves in life. Lyanna, welcome to Caring for Kids.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. And as you may know, and hopefully our listeners know, that mental health in children of all ages is a major focus area of ours. And it's almost like every month we have some discussion about that. So we're delighted that you're here and that you're going to talk about some of the things that you're doing.
Okay.
And maybe some of the things that you're seeing that concern all of us. And so let's start with when you're working with a family, you use a family system approach.
Right.
And so tell our listeners a little bit about how that works.
Well, it's one of the things you'll hear me say a lot is it depends. But when you have younger children, I usually like very much to have my family, the parents involved, so that they can be able to see the strategies that we're learning, and they're there to help them adopt it. So if it's a system, and a family is a system. If you think about cogs on a wheel, you can't take one part of that system out, the cog, and fix it or change it or in any way and then put it right back into the system without, the system being changed as well. So a lot of times I very much like for parents to be involved, especially with younger children. It's usually a very enlightening experience for everybody. Now, teenagers, that gets a little more prickly sometimes getting the parents involved.
I can imagine that maybe the conflict with parents would cause that to be an issue.
Right. So sometimes I am having to kind of play mediator a little bit, but being able to, help the child not feel like the parent is the enemy.
Right.
And if the parent is presenting as the enemy, how can I change their orientation to understand that their kid is doing the best that they can.
Right.
And then they can be able to orient to that a little bit differently so that they're no longer opposing one another, that they can actually feel like they're on the same team against a problem that they're both wanting to fix.
Great. Makes perfect sense. So you also are a trained facilitator of the Love and Logic parenting program. Mm-hmm. And how does that fit into the things we're talking about as well?
That is actually pretty interesting. Lisa Shepard and I both work on that frequently there at Wentworth, and it's about making children feel more accountable, feel like they have more control where it's appropriate to have control, letting kids make mistakes and learn through those mistakes rather than be shamed through those mistakes, so that they can be much more prepared when the real world comes. We try so hard to make them not make mistakes. We're all
Right.
so terrified. But actually, mistakes are good things, that we can actually celebrate them and actually promote a learning process through it that has no shame involved. It's a respectful stance towards it rather than a shame stance.
Right. We all make mistakes, and we got
Absolutely.
to learn from them. We're talking with Lyanna Leibert, professional counselor at the Wentworth & Associates, and we're talking about mental health issues and kids of all ages. And this one I'm not familiar with, and so I know you wanted to mention it. It's what you refer to as EMDR.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could explain what that really means and what, more importantly, what it is.
Okay. EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Very hard to say.
Yes, that's why I use the initials, because I don't think I could get through it.
It is really, yeah, it's a tongue twister. EMDR is kind of interesting because our bodies have a natural, the immune system, if you get a cut on your body, it has a mechanism for being able to heal itself.
Right.
Where actually what we call trauma, and there can be big T trauma where there's something really horrendous that happens, or there can be little T trauma, and shame is what I would call sometimes a little T trauma because our brain really can't notice the difference between shame and trauma. It's kind of experienced in a lot of the same way. But our brain also has a natural mechanism for being able to heal psychological trauma. So if you notice that at night when you go to sleep, you do REM, that is
Right.
rapid
Heard of
eye
that.
movement, okay, and you know that your eyes are shooting back and forth. While you're getting a good night's rest, your brain's actually continuing to consolidate that day's different events that happened, including the emotional component of
Okay.
it. And that may be that day, that week, that year, that decade, that it's still trying to work on things for you.
Lyanna, tell us about how that then impacts how you would use that in therapy.
What I do is I help resource them with being able to get into a calm state so that we can change state, so
Okay.
that they can experience emotional distress and then be able to get them back into a calm state. And they're kind of like going, oh, okay, I've got my landing gear. And that's that little help that we're
Gotcha.
giving them.
Yeah, so giving them a pathway to dealing with it in a positive way.
Yes.
Talking about behavioral health with Lyanna Leibert, and I saw that you are now counseling youngsters as young as 4 years old and utilizing play therapy, and I think I know what that might be, but how is that working?
It's, well, because a lot of times kids, they don't have language as well to wrap around their experiences. So what we do is play therapy actually taps into the right side of the brain, the emotional part of the brain. That's where they function. Play therapy is their language.
Yeah, right.
So we want to go into their world instead of sitting in a talk therapy setting. That's the grown-up world. We want to go into their play therapy world. I remember, one young lady, she had experienced a death of someone close to her, and one of the things that she would just keep doing is using the dolls and sand tray therapy to process that. She kept kind of like reburying this person over and over because she was having trouble accepting the loss of this person.
Right.
And the distress that she was having eventually, because she was able to process that.
Through this play therapy.
Through this
That
play
makes perfect
therapy.
sense.
And sometimes I have EMDR pulsers. You know how I talked about the eye movement
Yeah,
desensitization? Right. We have pulsers. Sometimes you can even just put that in their socks or in their shoes as they're processing this.
Okay.
And it actually helps facilitate that natural healing mechanism.
Okay. Wow, fascinating. So the age group that I hear the most about, I guess two age groups. One would be college-age students and teenagers. And so the one question before I let you go is two things. One, in counseling teens, you use this Why Try program.
Yes.
And then if you could finish by just saying what you're seeing. Are you seeing more of anxiety? Are you seeing more issues in kids? So I'd like to pick your brain about that.
Anxiety is definitely on the increase. I do point towards a lot of social media because there's a social inhibition through social media, that people will do things on social media that they would never do in person.
Right.
And this oftentimes does increase the anxiety.
And it's invisible sometimes.
It is. It is invisible.
So you're not accountable.
Right. The why try usually is for people who you'll have noticed that anxiety will come in two forms. It'll come with perfectionism. I'm almost scared unless I can do things perfectly because I'm afraid of being judged.
Right.
Or it might be that they're give up. I'm giving up. Why try? There's not much point.
That also has something to do with resilience, doesn't it?
Yes, there is. Some kids are very, very resilient. That depends on how resourced they are with their support system around them.
Because we hear a lot in our community outreach that the resilience factor is now is a big deal. That, in my generation, if bad things happen to you, sometimes you were told to grow up, man up, whatever, and deal with it. And younger generations maybe have not had that same opportunity. And so when they get on their own, particularly in college, if things happen to them that they're not with their support group, some bad things can happen. Is that correct?
It can. And I think that is another thing where resilience is built through mistakes, as I started. Right. That when bad things happen, we want to resource them with the ability that you got this. Here's how you can fix this or make this right. And then they kind of going, oh, okay, so I can stumble and fall and I can get up. Yeah. I have the resources I need within me, not only externally, but within me to be able to get back up again.
Well, thank you. Lyanna Leibert is she's a professional counselor with the Wentworth & Associates. You're doing great work, and we appreciate you being on Caring for Kids.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Coming up next, we're going to hear from Rod Alberts, who's the Executive Director of the Detroit Auto Dealers Association. That's when Caring for Kids continues here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR, presented by the Children's Hospital of Michigan Foundation.
Welcome back, everybody. Larry Burns here, Caring for Kids, May edition. In the studio, we have a great guest, Rod Alberts. Rod came to the Motor City nearly 30 years ago. We're glad you came 30 years ago.
Thanks, Larry.
Where he was soon named Executive Director of the Detroit Auto Dealers Association. We know it as the DADA, and the North American International Auto Show. As the Executive Director of the Detroit Auto Dealers Association, Rod represents more than 200 domestic and import new car and truck dealers in Southeast Michigan. Rod is the voice of the dealer business interests at the state and federal levels, and he creates and oversees communications, community relations, educational, and most importantly for us, charitable activities for the dealer group. Rod serves another very important role as the Executive Director of the world-renowned North American International Auto Show. He manages all aspects of the show, including more than 5,000 international media from over 60 countries and nearly 1 million visitors attending annually. The show's charity preview event is renowned as one of the largest fundraising events of its kind in the world. That's the world, raising over $117 million since its inception. And we are honored and so grateful to be one of the recipients at the Children's Hospital of Michigan Foundation. So thank you, Rod.
You're welcome, Larry.
Today, Rod serves on a number of automotive and community boards and committees and has been recognized by so many local organizations for his service to the auto industry, his innovation, and his commitment to our community. So congratulations on all of that.
Yeah, thanks, Larry.
Appreciate it. And so also congratulations on yet another great North American International Auto Show this past January. As I mentioned, the foundation is one of the many recipients. And the millions of dollars we've received over the years have gone to help kids at Children's, and now even beyond that as we change a bit. And I know that you're really, really busy planning for the 2020 event, and so I'd like to have our listeners learn a little bit more of what those plans are shaping up to be.
Yeah, it's coming together really, really good. We're about a year out. Next month will be it'll be June 2020 that we're kind of doing the countdown. But the idea is things have changed. I've been here 30 years, and I love Detroit and what we've done with the show. But over that time, we've had incremental growth and a lot of media coverage. But it's a new day, and millennials want to be in cars and have engagement with the vehicle and all that new technology that is a part of the car.
Right.
So we're going to make that happen. And the beauty is Detroit is so prime time for this right now. It's just ripe for showing off our city to people around the world that could come in, and during Consumer Days, some others that come in from regionally or around the country that can actually see the Disneyland of mobility right here, because we're going to make activations happen for people, and they can get in the car and experience ride and drives and actually off-road possibilities, and it's going to be an amazing event, and more than just static, it's going to be dynamic. And that's what Detroit's all about, and that's where we're headed.
The ability to be both inside and outside has to give you so many more options to do stuff.
It does. You know, we consider it a campus. You know, the idea of having 1 million square feet indoor, counting all the rooms and facility, with the renovation that was done years ago by the Convention Authority that put $300 million into it during a tough time, during bankruptcy for Detroit. So that was unique and really a big mark for moving things forward and anticipation. But having outdoors 14 acres on the campus now that's right there on the river, we have things here in Detroit to work with that most people don't. We have opportunities that offer a landscape of hard surface and grass and trees, that we can do things like they do at Goodwood, which is a big event in England, and a hybrid of that between maybe a South by Southwest. So whether you're a consumer or you're media or your industry execs, it's going to be, as Detroit should be, the mobility capital of the world in a different way, not just Motor City, but moving on to all things mobility. And cars will still be a focus. Unveilings will be very important here, too. But having the month of June, and think about this, 9 o'clock at night, it'll still be light out. Yeah. It won't be December or January where it's 4:30. And it's going to be warmer, too. Best month of the year.
I also think it's cool that the outside part of it, because when I bring friends from other parts of the country and we're downtown, I grew up here, so I'm used to looking across the river and seeing another country. But a lot of people, I have some friends who grew up in Nebraska, and they're just mesmerized by that. That's really Canada. The fact that it's an international auto show and that another country will be visible and beautiful from our viewpoint. So, and I think that will add some real pizzazz.
International auto show, international city. It all kind of plays into it. And mobility is not just on land, but it's on water and you name it. So you think about the diversity of manufacturers and the extending of the brand of what they do with motorsports and on the water. There's really no limit, because we have all those resources and all those assets here. Think about the tunnel too. You know, this is kind of off to the side, but you know, they've during the marathon in Detroit, they shut down the tunnel for a few hours. You never know. Maybe you drive an autonomous vehicle through it.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
The shuttles and all the things you can do, and with Detroit and the manufacturers doing more downtown now, with GM, Ford, and Chrysler or FCA, it's just an open door. 10 years ago, couldn't do it, but today, a different story.
Well, I just, I mentioned a while ago that I just admire your vision of making a change, of something that's been so successful, so well received, but deciding that, we got to change with the times. And I'm so excited about what opportunities. I have to believe that music is going to be a part of it, too, outside, just because of the venues that are developing along the river. And in the other events during that period of time, this year we'll experience the first Quicken Loans PGA tournament, so we'll have a year under our belt with that.
Well, the vision of the dealers, and I must say that, again, this the auto show that we have here, going back to the change 30 years ago, going from regional to international,
right, I remember.
Has been a vision of the auto dealers and people like Keith Crane and others that have been a part of it that really had an idea in mind. And that's when I was brought in right after that. So credit to them. But the Dealer Association, Doug North is going to be our chairman in 2020. And we've had others that came before him. Bill Gowling was our chairman this year. But we have Joe Longhammer and Thad Zott and others they're going to be coming up with the next 2 or 3 years, have really a great game plan, what's in mind. But the idea of taking the month of June, and if you look at it from all the things going on, Detroit, not the auto show, but Detroit could own the month of June. Yeah. It's our best weather month of the year. It's an opportunity with the Grand Prix on the front end, with other festivals that are going on in between. Fireworks, and then you got the Quicken Loans event with the golf. And when you go back to it earlier than that, I'm sure you go to the Chamber event, but it's right before the Grand Prix, so we can all kind of celebrate and get ready up at Mackinac,
and then come back
and get ready for a month of fun and excitement. And
that is
Detroit. I think the world will converge and actually come. It'll be a time for everybody to come to Detroit.
Yeah, I totally agree, and to get new audiences to the show, be it young and. The next generation that I think we'd be concerned about would be the Z generation, which are the kids now in college, and then the millennials, and what a great opportunity. Are you seeing the emergence of Detroit and the things that that Dan Gilbert has done and the Illiches have done and all the things that are going on with Mayor Duggan. Is that impacting your planning as well? So this resurgence?
Completely. It takes a village, as they say,
right.
Or a city. But Dan Gilbert's been a great leader. Look what he's done with downtown and making it safer with Duggan, doing a lot more with cameras and everything else, too. But the whole idea of having great leaders in the community and then having great vision with the dealers that we have that are part of their communities here with the car dealers, and then having other people that just come together to make sure that we do it together, because the economic impact being so important for Detroit and the hotels and the airlines with Delta is a big part of our show. It's a really experience from beginning to end, but it takes all those parts and pieces to really put Detroit out front on a global stage,
right,
that we can change the perceptions. I think it's already been changed a lot, but we can do some more.
Right, and I think the media, particularly the national, international media, when they come in the summer, and they see this, because they're used to January.
Think about, too, parking. You always try to park close to Cobo in January. Right. We're kind of built for a city that's built out like Paris, going out with the spokes, Woodward Avenue, running into our place. You can walk 15 minutes and maybe go to Co-America Park, too.
Yeah.
So there's no end. DAC, everything's a walking.
The Detroit Club is open again. I was just there this week.
And it's right there next to Cobo.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And so I think these
think about
hotels,
that.
too, will be open.
Hotels will be walking. Shinola opened up, and new restaurants, 180 restaurants in Detroit now.
Yeah.
And then everything walking distance. So Charity Preview Night, raising all that money again for charities, and you guys are so important in the community and what you do.
Thank you.
And we're proud that you're part of it. You've helped sell tickets and bring more people in. But in the end, all that money going back to children, a byproduct of a great press week that we're able to give money to the kids,
right,
and to our foundation too that we have. We've given out to about 120 additional children's charities,
right, beyond
the 10 that are part of the Charity Preview.
Yeah.
So. It's a byproduct, but it's a way of giving back,
right,
and having to do what you guys do and helping kids. That's the love of the show, and I think everybody, again, coming together to make that happen.
Yeah, and it is our most important partnership that we have, and you need to know that how important that is to us, and whatever we can do. I know that you're going to make some decisions on the Charity Preview, and it may change, probably will be my guess. But whatever those decisions are, we're 120% behind anything you're going to do.
Well, the jury's still out on what we do on that night. There will be a Charity Preview, but I think it's going to be easier to get around downtown. You don't have to wait for a car to take you somewhere, too. You can walk to it and maybe make it a little bit more chic. Whether it's black tie or not, we have to determine. And I like your feedback on that, too.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Tradition is meant to be broken sometimes, and we have to decide whether this is one of those moments. But in the end, if we are able to have a great time for the attendees, that's focus, but more importantly is to make sure we raise some money for the children and the charities. It gets me more passionate every day about what we're doing.
Good. Well, you can certainly tell. And we're good partners with Ryan and Kelly LaFontaine and the You Can't Survive efforts that they have. They're great people, and I know that Ryan, I think, is a past chairman.
He is. He was a couple years ago and did a wonderful job, and I know them well, and they do a great deal in their community, too, just on their own. But he's been through a lot. He had cancer, and look at what he's done with that and turn that into a positive, helping other kids.
He has, and he helps us, and he helps U of M and Beaumont, and so and then he helps your organization as well. So, Rod Alberts, thank you very much.
Larry, thank you
for what you do, and I can't wait for next summer. And whatever you need from us, we're there to help in any way we can.
Well, that's great, Larry. Thank you. You're a great partner, and we'll look forward to more to be done with this. It'll be great.
Thank you, Rod. So, coming up next, we're going to hear from Gary Cates. He's the Chief Philanthropy Officer at ProMedica. When Caring for Kids continues right here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR. Presented by the Children's Hospital of Michigan Foundation. Once again, here's Larry Burns.
Welcome back, everybody. Larry Burns, Caring for Kids, May edition. All the guests are in the studio tonight. Joining me now from Toledo, Ohio, my former town for 26 years. I love Toledo. Is Gary Cates. He's the Chief Philanthropy Officer at ProMedica. Gary has held a number of leadership roles in acute and ambulatory care throughout ProMedica, most recently serving as president of ProMedica Defiance Regional Hospital and ProMedica Transportation Network. Gary has a Master's of Business Administration in Finance and International Business degree from the University of Michigan. Go Wolverines. And I know he is a proud Spartan, too, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from MSU. He is a founding member of the Defiance 100 Economic Development Committee and is also a former member of the State Bank Financial Group, State Bank Board of Directors, and the United Way of Defiance County and Executive Board. And so, Gary, welcome to Caring for Kids.
Well, thank you, Larry. Good to be here. With that introduction, I think I have to say go green.
Go green, yes. All right. I kind of figured that. So I know a lot about the ProMedica health system, and I want to make sure our listeners are familiar with it. So tell us a little bit about what ProMedica is and how that is evolving as a major integrated health system in the United States.
Yeah. Well, as you know well, your roots and your history in Toledo, ProMedica today, we think of ourselves as a health and wellness organization.
Right.
Obviously, our roots and legacy has been on the hospital side,
right,
and hospitals coming together. We're based in Toledo, Ohio, but we have facilities in Southeast Michigan, South Central Michigan. So we have hospitals in Monroe, Tecumseh, Adrian, and over in Coldwater. Right. So a nice strong Michigan presence on the lower end. Of course, we kind of push up towards Detroit here with the southeast portion of that, and then we have a number of other hospitals throughout northwest Ohio. But in recent days, one of the bigger moves was we acquired HCR Manor Care, which, as you know, headquartered in Toledo, had fallen on some tough years, able to put together a deal that brought HCR Manor Care into the ProMedica organization, which then put us in 28 states. We've got about 400 facilities around the country in the senior living space. So you're right. We're evolving, continuing to grow, and kind of taking that look at the overall health and wellness of individuals, which gets us beyond just the hospitals.
Yeah, and I the HCR Manor Care is a huge deal, and the vision of Randy Oster, your CEO, my friend, is, that really was something that showed the innovation of having a leader and then a board and others that are really trying to make an impact on healthcare as it relates to integrating it and wellness and serving, and also helping a company in Toledo that you mentioned that had sort of fallen on tough times. So
they'd fallen on tough times, and I would agree with you. Very visionary. In fact, I think when the deal was first announced, middle of last year, a lot in the industry kind of scratched their heads and said, what is a ProMedica doing,
right,
acquiring the nation's second largest provider in the skilled nursing, memory care, home health, hospice arena. And I think afterwards, when they thought about it, and you think about the demographics of this nation, and we call it the silver tsunami that's coming. Right. It's like it was crazy as a fox. I think, a good move for ProMedica, but for Toledo, the company unfortunately was on a path that it probably was going to get carved up and sold off. And when you think about that, the corporate jobs, which in Toledo, that meant about 1,500 jobs, they go nowhere in that type of move. So on top of just being a good acquisition for ProMedica, it was really a good move for Toledo and hopefully keeping those very important jobs in our community.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Toledo. It's close to Detroit. I used to work at the University of Toledo, and we recruited a lot of students from the Detroit area. It's 40 to 60 miles, depending on where you want to go. It's in a different state, but it's as close as many of Detroit's suburbs. And so you mentioned the hospitals that you have in Michigan. And so we're developing some partnerships with the Children's Hospital Michigan Foundation and ProMedica, from Toledo Children's Hospital to the other hospitals you mentioned. And talk about what your thoughts are about having a presence not only in Michigan, but possibly Detroit, like our partnership.
Yeah. So let me first just go back to your comment about Toledo. I grew up in Trenton, Michigan.
Right.
So very familiar with Toledo.
Right.
In my younger days, we either ran down to Toledo or up to Detroit.
Yeah, right.
So we're the neighbor to the south. And you're right, very much, I think, a strong relationship between the two communities and a lot of the same type of issues being faced. From our standpoint, obviously we're interested in things in Detroit. You and I got the chance actually to meet around where ProMedica has a strong interest in what we call the social determinants of health. And it was out of that, Larry, you and I met. And actually, you came to a dinner we did in Detroit, talked about social determinants. And I think out of those discussions, we've had the chance to talk about one of the large issues facing not just the Detroit community, the Toledo community, is the need for pediatric psych services, behavioral services.
Longer term,
particularly acute.
Yes.
When we have episodes that young person needs an acute stay, very difficult for all hospitals in this area to find those beds. I was surprised when you came out and met with our presidents to talk about this concept of, can we get together and do something as far away as our Coldwater Hospital was at that meeting.
They were all in.
I was surprised to hear the president say, actually, because I was worried about the distance of Coldwater to Detroit if we were to build something. And the answer was, we need it, and yes, we would use it in Detroit. So that's how big the need is.
Yeah. We're talking with Gary Cates, Chief Philanthropy Officer at ProMedica, and we're talking about our partnerships that's evolving. In the near future, I think we're going to be announcing some grant opportunities that our foundation will be involved with your hospitals in Michigan. And so
we're looking forward to that announcement, Larry.
Yes, and you stepped forward and helped with our first annual Behavioral Health Summit that took place on May 14th. And then the other thing you mentioned is the social determinants of health, which ProMedica is a national leader in. And I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about some of the things you've done in Toledo that are very innovative in a second. But you also were instrumental in creating something that is a national coalition called the Root Cause. And we're a member of that at the foundation. Barb Peaty is the president or executive director of that.
Executive director.
And so tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So first, maybe just to back up for half a minute.
Yep.
Social determinants of health. So what we're talking about there are factors such as hunger, housing, education, employment, transportation. We talk in terms of we see 10 dimensions in that arena. Right. Stats have shown and research has demonstrated, if you're concerned about the overall health and well-being of an individual, the reality is 80% of that health and well-being has to do with social determinants. The other 20% is what we do clinically.
Right. Which is an amazing stat, and people need to know that.
And when you think about that and why we're focused on that is we do think those items as hunger and employment, et cetera, are health issues.
Right.
And if we're going to address overall health and well-being in our neighborhoods, in our communities, we've got to begin to step outside the four walls of institutions like hospitals and take on the responsibility for that overall health indicator of the community. And so that's led ProMedica into, as you mentioned, very blessed to have a CEO who's very visionary, very dedicated to this work, and helping nudge other systems around the country to start thinking differently about this, and we can be a catalyst.
You are a catalyst, yeah. And for a hospital to really take the lead, traditional hospital, who back a decade or two, they were only interested in getting patients in the hospital, and now you've kind of reversed that, saying we want to be the best hospital in the world, but we want you to be healthy and well and have a fulfilling life. And that to me is very innovative and really doing what hospital leadership should do.
Right. So if you think about it today, and not to go into too much of the economics, but we get paid fee for service.
Right.
The difference here is we're looking, saying we should be paid on those community health indicators.
Right.
When our community does well, we should get off of this fee for service. Now, that's a long-range look.
Right, sure.
But as we are working these social determinants of health and asking other systems to jump in, part of what we announced about a year or so ago is a National Center for Research on this end. If you're ever going to change the reimbursement model, we've got to have robust data that we can share with policymakers and lawmakers to say, this is where we should be going.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I want to mention is the innovative, what I call prescription grocery facility you have in Toledo. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've got a couple innovative things that have come along. We've been on this journey for a good decade or so.
Right.
And Larry, it started with concern about our kids, and we wanted to put some dietitians into the schools there in Toledo to teach better nutrition. And lo and behold, these dietitians came back and said, hey, you know what? These kids are hungry. It's a hunger issue.
Right.
So you start to look at that, and that led us to looking and saying hunger is a health issue.
Right.
Then you start asking the questions, why? Why are these kids in homes where there's food insufficiency?
Right.
it leads to then looking at those social determinants.
Right.
Maybe because there's no employment.
No transportation.
No transportation. You start asking the question why and behind that. That's what's led us over the past 10 years down this path to the point where we're looking at that universe of social determinants and saying we've got to make some changes. So one of the things we do, we've committed to screening every patient that comes through our doors, that we've got a set of questions that ask about the social determinants. And what you highlighted with the food pharmacy is that we have found there's a lot of food insufficiency.
Right.
And so, one of the things is a lot of people, you can tell them you need to go get food, and they may or may not do it.
Right.
You give them a prescription from their provider for food, guess what? They're going to take that a little more seriously and hopefully follow up with it.
And get the right food.
You get the right food. So what we've put in our facilities is what we call a food pharmacy at this point. Yeah. So we do two things. One is we're going to send you home with several days' supply of food right then and there. But we're also, more importantly, had built with the hospital council there in Northwest Ohio what we call a hub, which is our referral center that then we're going to plug you in with appropriate services in the community. Because it's one thing to meet that immediate need, but we need to break that cycle.
Yeah, excellent. So, ProMedica is truly a national and international leader in all of this, and looking forward to the Root Cause Convention this summer that I'm attending again, and looking forward to our partnership evolving with your 3 Michigan hospitals and your great Toledo Children's Hospital. So say hi to Randy Oster and all my friends in Toledo. So coming up next, I'm going to introduce you to this month's Little Champion and provide an update on some of the Foundation's news, some of our events that are coming up. It's right here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
It's Caring for Kids with Larry Burns.
Well, it was a great show tonight. It's always great to have all the guests in the studio. And now, my favorite portion of the show is the Little Champion feature. The Little Champion program honors children who have overcome major obstacles in their young lives and continue to tackle those challenges with a smile each and every day. And this month's Little Champion is 7-year-old Jamie from Grand Blanc, Michigan. Jamie was involved in a terrible motor vehicle accident that caused him to be airlifted to our Children's Hospital of Michigan with a traumatic brain injury. This injury led to a 30-day coma and an array of other physical challenges. But like a true champion, Jamie made it out of his coma, rehabbed his ailments, and is now on a fast track to being better than ever. Congratulations, Jamie, this month's Little Champion. So I mentioned a couple things about the foundation. We had a great 3rd annual Derby for Kids. We raised money for Children's Hospital of Michigan and Mott Children's Hospital for brain cancer research. We had our 1st annual Mental Health Summit on May 14th. That was a sellout and a home run. It was great. We're going to do it again. A couple events coming up. June 1st, we have the Celebration of Life at C.J. Barrymore's in Clinton Township. Thanks for joining us tonight on Caring for Kids. Have a great month, and I'll see you next time.
Caring for Kids on WJR has been presented by the Children's Hospital of Michigan Foundation.